All right, I want to do a little bit of call and response here. So, can I hear the congregation say yes?
Yes.
Can I hear the congregation say that's right?
That's right.
Can I hear the congregation say amen?
Amen.
Okay, now that we have said those once, it will be easier for you to say them again later in the sermon should you feel the urge to do so. Nature doesn't exist. At least that is the claim of the controversial Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek. He, of course, received flack for saying that, and he's known for his controversial statements. What could he possibly mean by saying that nature doesn't exist? Nature is an impossible thing to deny. All we need to do is walk outside and see the plants and the leaves in order to notice that nature does indeed exist. That's right. That's right. We just need to touch the brittle bark of the tree and sneeze at the pollen-rich air and hear the soft calls of the barn owl at midnight to know that nature exists. Amen. It's no secret. What he is said is right, yes. But I think what Žižek is saying is actually less startling than it sounds at first. I take his intent to be that when we talk about nature, nature is entangled in our own concepts and fantasies about what is natural and what nature is. We tell ourselves stories about nature. We write novels about nature. We have theories about nature. We compose poetry about nature, perhaps none better than Mary Oliver, the poet that we read this morning. And often these creations do not simply observe nature, but they create a fantasy about nature. Another philosopher, this one taking his cue from Žižek, said that nature is like a mirror for us. It often shows us our ideas and fantasies about ourselves. Religious concepts offer one such mirror. Here I am specifically thinking about a pretty obscure, complex, but deeply influential philosophy that emerged from within Roman Catholicism. It's called natural law theory, and it was created by Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century. It argues that God imparted certain intentions to creation. And these intentions or laws spell out what is natural and moral, and also what is unnatural and immoral. These laws are evident when we reason about the purpose of things. Sexuality is a quintessential example here. It is intended, it is intended for reproduction. Any sexual act that does not lead to reproduction is, in this view, unnatural and immoral. But yeah, that's right. I'm just glad nobody said amen to that. If that is the case, if God intended some sort of law for nature to follow, then I want to say that somehow the memo got lost along the way. When we look at the natural world, we see a wild proliferation of sexualities. Same-sex pairings happen throughout the animal kingdom. This has been extensively documented in hundreds of species. Likewise, there are hundreds of species that are intersex and that will change their sex. From this, we gather that sexual pairing is designed not simply to reproduce. Its ends are diverse. It is used to create community, relieve boredom, solidify hierarchies, dissolve hierarchies, care for biological offspring, care for adoptive offspring, serve as a greeting as well as a goodbye, incite jealousy, bring about happiness and contentment. Occasionally, it makes babies too. This is where the argument becomes politically relevant. there is often a claim that homosexuality and transgender characteristics are unnatural. In fact, in Florida, this argument has again reared its head, and we're hearing this more and more at the school board meetings that are happening there as they attempt to ban books. And the people pushing that argument, the argument that queer and transgender people are unnatural, know that they must do window dressing in order to make their argument appear legitimate. For example, some school districts in Florida have banned And Tango Makes Three, which is a true story about two male penguins that adopted and raised a baby chick. This book about the natural lives of two penguins apparently felt too unnatural to these parents in Florida. Now, some think that science will come in and save us here. And I want to say this is a bit iffy. Sometimes science relies on its own set of fantasies. In recent years, Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection has received some overdue critique. Specifically, scientists have scrutinized the concept of survival of the fittest. Now, this theory has a beautiful simplicity and clarity about it, and no doubt in many instances it is supported by the evidence. At the same time, the interpretation of it, or maybe I should say the application of it, can become simplistic. It has made many scientists obsess about the evolutionary purposes of particular features and actions. So, for instance, sexuality is thought to be for the purpose of reproduction. It is hammered in that literature. The literature on evolutionary biology is replete with that assumption. And this has ignored the proliferation of evidence that sexuality is used for all sorts of things in nature, reproduction being only one of those things. The theologies and the theories that we use to capture the natural world think that they do just that, capture the world. But it is a bit like pinning the butterfly on the corkboard. You may pin it down, but it dies in the process. And so I return to poetry here, specifically that poem that Gloria read so well this morning, the poem by Henri Cole. He writes, I think about all the dogmas and traditions which are so like well-made beds with fitted sheets and tucked-in hospital corners made to die in. Our ideas that are so neat and tidy, our doctrines and dogmas and traditions, our received information about the universe, about life, and about the divine, for that matter, are so often like those well-made beds, ones designed for us to die in. But, the poet writes, as he sits on his rock and observes, when I see deeper, it's as if everything is lit from below or from within. A greater appreciation beyond the mirrors that we hold up to ourselves is always at our fingertips, just a hair's breadth away. And so beyond natural laws and survival of the fittest, do we have another model for imagining nature? One that is more generous and expansive, one that is more creative, one that is less domesticated and reflective of dominant hierarchies? I think the answer is yes. Bruce Bagamill is an evolutionary biologist. He has his PhD in evolutionary biology, and he has created just such a concept. His book, Biological Exuberance, is a bestiary that charts the great varieties of ways that animals create life and express their sexuality. And his take is that nature is not some sterile lab environment where we can draw simple conclusions about the purposes of evolutionary features. Instead, he says life is so much more like a surging stream where there are pockets of scarcity and lack, but also pockets of abundance and excess that life is interacting with and responding to. Times when the fittest survive, times when no one survives, and times when sprawling, chaotic excess is transmitted from one generation to the next. All of the droplets in the stream are intersecting in ways that are so complicated and multifactorial that it makes our basic concepts break down. We don't see a straightforward calculation of traits that are being passed from parent to offspring. The fittest may be part of communities that use sexualities in ways that diverge wildly from reproduction. And so instead, what we see is an explosion of color and life in such dizzying complexity that it is impossible to assign them a simple instrumental purpose. And this verges on mystery. This verges on transcendence. As Bagamel puts it, and I quote him here, "It is about the unspeakable inexplicability of Earth's mysteries, which are as immediate as the next heartbeat. Biological exuberance is, above all, an affirmation of life's vitality and infinite possibilities, a worldview that is at once primordial and futuristic, in which gender is kaleidoscopic, sexualities are multiple, and categories of male and female are fluid and transmutable. A world, in short, exactly like the one we inhabit." Now, I want to just take a moment to imagine what a God who created this world would look like. And we can take God as an actual being or a character, it doesn't matter to me, but like let's just imagine, like if we got to imagine what a God who created this kind of world would look like, let's do that. I think that God would be ridiculously liberal, beyond anything that we humans could imagine. And I mean liberal here both as broad-minded and inclusive, but also in the same sense that we mean liberal when we say a liberal helping of pasta at the dinner table. Like giving too much. This God just creates and gives too much and then just keeps doing it. God gives out 3 hearts and 8 arms to the octopus. God makes 10% of white-tailed deer intersex. God makes male penguins and black swans that form monogamous lifelong bonds and raise adopted chicks. God makes male seahorses that give birth to hundreds of iridescent babies. God makes snails that wrap their slimy bodies around each other, not for reproductive purposes, but rather because it looks more like an amorous dance. Such a God creates animals that when they get bored with being one, they simply split in 2, reproducing by infinite division. There is something so delicious and vibrant about this creation, something so sensual and intense and intimate and incommunicable about this simple being, which is anything but simplistic. It's as if, writes the poet, everything is lit from below and from within.
Amen.
Oh, yes.
And with all of that being said, I feel compelled to ask, why is it that these families in Florida wish to violate this natural order, this divine will that expresses itself in the explosive polymorphous potential of queer becoming? Isn't it blasphemy to cut up and cut out the vast variety, the multifaceted multiplicities, the extravagant exuberance of these many sexualities and biologies? Isn't it like taking the luminosity out of the life world? Isn't it like refusing the gifts that we are given by being simply alive Isn't it like tearing away a beautiful coat, a coat of many colors, not because you will use it, but rather because its colors are too bright for somebody's dim little world? I don't want that for nature, and I don't want that for you. I want nature to reflect all of its brilliant colors back to us, just like I want you to do that.